Hello, good evening and welcome to The Review. We have a very special program for you this evening. We're coming to you from the sidelines of the Economic Summit organized by the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Joining me first off is the Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Rajendra Tyagaraja. Thank you very much for taking the time
Always
off.
a pleasure.
I'm sure you're very busy and you have lots of organizing and coordinating to get back to. Let me start off by asking you, there's a very interesting theme for the summit this year, the turnaround. And this also, the summit is happening against a backdrop where you see officials like the Prime Minister and the Central Bank that are having to defend the state of the economy against what is being said by international ratings agencies and publications, etc. What is important about the economic summit this year in this context?
The whole theme of saying that this is at the cusp of a turnaround is being given the background that towards the last year we noticed that Sri Lanka, in fairness, we've seen some improvement, we've seen certainly a better democratic environment for expression of speech. We've seen from the numbers, FDI certainly had improved to an all-time high, exports had gone up. But in that backdrop, early during the first few months of this year, we have also started to see a slower economic growth, probably constrained by the limited fiscal space because of the continued consolidation on the fiscal side. And we've noticed some extraneous factors external to Sri Lanka also facing us. For example, like the increased protectionism from some of the bigger nations as well as the big four central banks, reducing the injection of liquidity into emerging markets, triggering off what we call the emerging markets sell-off. And these are some of the things which a small country like Sri Lanka cannot afford to ignore, especially when more than 50% of our deficit tends to get funded by foreign inflows. So I think the timing was right to alert to a turnaround, but also to see as to how and whether it could be fast-tracked, and then to look at maybe 6 or 7 thematic issues or levers which we felt could either propel it or and examine those levers in more greater detail. And we have invited around more than 40 eminent people, both locally and internationally, to be a part of the panel, the moderators as well as presenters, complete diversification from 3 pools: government, independent policy think tanks, and the private sector. So you have a fairly good dynamics on these 3 pillars to interact and create a dynamic argument and a conversation, which we will hopefully at the final session present these summary findings to the Prime Minister, who will be there, and give a message from the Chamber.
At the time of recording, we're entering the latter stages of the summit.
Yes.
Over the past 1.5 days, what have you been hearing from the voices of the business community?
So I think at the end of each session, we have also been using an online app to record the opinion of almost 500 participants. And a couple of important things. One is the need to recognize that there are external factors which also pose a risk to our progress is certainly recognized as opposed to domestic factors. The second thing is, I think, while people recognize that there is enough work done on strategies and plans, the consistent message which has come out is the need for consistency in policy, and secondly, relentless focus on execution. And the third issue is this fear or concern of the lack of adequate communication with stakeholders, which I think is also reflecting in some of the poll percentages which distances facts from reality.
On the subject of this sort of polarization and the lack of communications between different stakeholders, I noticed that, I'm not sure if it's for the first time in the history of the Economic Summit, but you've also brought together the other chambers, the National Chamber of Commerce, the Chamber of Young Lankan Entrepreneurs, the FCCI, Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry. What was the thinking behind this, and is this a first?
See, the Ceylon Chamber is a 179-year chamber which has been the godfather. But saying that, we also recognize that there are, over the last few decades, the emergence of at least a half a dozen chambers, trade, mainly in nature, which have their own space and they have also their own voice. While recognizing that each of these chambers have their own distinct DNA, we also felt it was time for us to get together and examine common issues which are of national interest, either relating to economic policy and or anything else, whether it's peace, harmony, ethnic issues, and come in as a joint voice on the belief that 2 plus 2 can be more than 4 if it is harnessed in the right direction. So we're really pleased of that session, and we look forward to a meaningful dialogue soon after lunch.
When you think of the competing ideologies of the Ceylon Chamber and the National Chamber and the Chamber of Young Lankan Entrepreneurs, are you optimistic that you can find this kind of harmony that you're talking about?
Which I think I'm pretty optimistic, because one of the first things which gave us the signal was soon after the recent disturbances in Kandy and the Central Province, when Ceylon Chamber raised the concern of ethnic discord and the need for preservation of law and order. You had no less than 6 chambers who came together and said, we would like to also endorse this with our logos, because this is common for the success of a future Sri Lanka. And that made us to believe that it's time to reactivate the Joint Business Forum. And while giving each chamber their own breathing space, pull out common issues of common objectives and go with one voice.
Mr. Tyagaraja, thank you very much again for taking the time and coming talking to us. I wish you all the best for the rest of the summit, and of course with the Joint Business Forum going forward as well. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back on the other side with the Chief Economist of the Ceylon Chamber, Mr. Shiran Fernando. Welcome back to the program. We're joined by Shiran Fernando, Chief Economist at the Ceylon Chamber. We're on the sidelines of the Economic Summit organized by the Chamber. Shiran, just in the previous segment we were talking to the Chamber's chairman, Mr. Tyagaraja, and we mentioned the fact that it's a very interesting theme, the turnaround. Given the backdrop against which the Economic Summit is taking place this year, where you've seen what international ratings agencies and publications have had to say about the resilience of the Sri Lankan economy, how important is this theme, the turnaround?
So, I mean, exactly, I think that's why we sort of chose this theme, because we're getting all these kind of mixed signals. Some of the government says, things are stable, things are good. Private sector itself has certain issues, drives policy consistency. And then you have what's going on externally. So it's essentially where to next in terms of Sri Lanka's economy. And interestingly, why turn around and on the fast track is because we've gone through these historic economic cycles, boom and bust cycles, but we've always, in a sense, gone around and round. We've never really broken the cycle and maybe moved forward with more sustainable policies. So I think that with those kind of things in mind, we've conceptualized, okay, first we'll evaluate maybe where the economy is. Are we actually turning around, or are we moving forward? And then look at what are the levers, because I think you also need to, what the idea of this summit is also to tell government, okay, these are the levers, these are the methods, and these are some of the recommendations. So you have levers such as some of the big infrastructure projects, you have some of the gains that the private sector as well as government can do through the digital economy. You need an energized bureaucracy. I think that is a topic that we wanted to really take on, because certain things need to be, driven on regardless of political climate. We need certain things passed, and of course trade, investment, and services reform in the context of driving some of those initiatives, making us more competitive. So it's in all that background, I think, that this theme was selected, and I think the discussions have, to a large extent, done justice to the theme, and also given a lot of, I think, not really answered some of the questions, but given a lot of food for thought that we could take on and tell policymakers, this is what these experts had to say, and this is our expectation.
Moving forward, beyond the discussions, are you optimistic that a turnaround is possible in the short term, in the next couple of years, given that we've already seen a downgrading of the growth forecast for this year?
So it's how you define what your turnaround is, and I think it can be to a lot of people different things. It could be growth, it could be more sustainable policies, it could be driving some of the reforms we keep talking about. So I think at the end of the day, it's a mix of these. What we want to echo through this conference and some of the outcome is we need some of these things going forward in the next 12 months. We are facing a lot of risk. Sometimes even if you do a lot of great domestic things in the next 12 to 6 months, something goes really wrong in global markets, which is what's going on right now. With a lot of the pressure coming on the currency, we would be very sensitive to it. So we want to highlight these things so that at least my base case expectation is that we don't go steps backwards. If we can survive and then look at the opportunities and grow, and I think that will in itself be that.
You spoke of the need to sort of energize the bureaucracy regardless of the political climate. The political climate right now is quite tense. We've seen that we're seeing concentration of different powers in different individuals, and we're seeing a lack of harmony among the policymakers and legislators in the country. In this backdrop, when you say the bureaucracy needs to sort of take the initiative, and given the history of Sri Lanka's bureaucracy, or the recent history of Sri Lanka's bureaucracy and our bureaucrats, is that a possibility?
So from the, I think,
let me rephrase it this way. You had a session at the Economic Summit with some very senior officials from the administrative service. What was your key takeaway from that session? What are the challenges that they're facing?
So we had a very senior IAS officer from India coming in. What he explained is bureaucracy is complex. It's not only your country that's facing these, even in their country they're hearing bureaucracy slow, not really meeting the private sector needs. So there are a lot of common trends that we can get to it. But I think some of even the bureaucrats that were there sort of highlighted is they're sort of working within the constitution. They're working within the current framework. So yes, they do realize the need to be more private sector friendly. Some of them suggested we need to maybe transform into the 21st century needs, and we're still laid back on the old foundation. So a lot of these needs, a lot of these changes came about during this discussion, and I think they are quite understanding. At least the panelists who came here are quite understanding of the need for these kind of things. And it's for us, I guess, to push these forward, to make sure that at least a few of these, be in motion, and some of these gears shift in motion, so that at least the bureaucracy moves in the right direction.
In 2015, the government signed up to the Open Government Partnership, and one of the main sort of drives of this program is to really improve public service delivery and the overall efficiency of the public service in a multitude of sectors. However, since then there has been very little progress. You've seen legislation like RTI, etc., that has made government more open, but on the side of improving efficiency in the past couple of years, it hasn't really taken off. Are you confident that this could be kind of a watershed, a turning point to get that takeoff?
Well, we aspire to, but I would be very optimistic aspiring to. But I think, to their credit, there are certain things that maybe they've achieved together. So, for example, we're getting EU GST Plus, which is a concerted effort within the bureaucracy to get these things delivered. So there are little wins which we may not really see. Maybe we need to highlight them to maybe motivate them and inspire them forward. But it's going to be challenging, and I think bringing them onto a platform such as this, giving them the space to voice actually what are their concerns, I think will then help them go back and realize, okay, and even from the questions that were coming into them, okay, this is what the private sector is feeling, this is what the pulse of the people is feeling. So maybe, I don't want to envisage like grand.
But there is a plan to continuously engage these officials moving forward.
Definitely, I think, because what we want to do with the summit is also not make it like just another talk shop, but we also want to make sure that some of these recommendations, discussion points get taken forward, and we did that even last year with some of these action points given to these line ministries. So that'll be an ongoing thing, and we want this to actually help the development of the country.
Shiran, thank you very much for taking the time. I'm sure you're very busy and you want to get back to lunch. I'll let you go, wishing you all the best and every success moving forward. Thank you. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the program. On our final segment this evening, we're featuring some key voices from the Economic Summit so far.
The problem, the way I see it, of the growth that is stuck, why we can't speed up our growth is because we are not increasing exports to cover the increase in imports as growth accelerates. So in a very simplified way, that is the problem. Because that really is the problem that we need to resolve. If you look at the numbers, which I love to look at, our trade share dropped over time. However much people say, look, the economy is expanding, unless you are able to get the trade to GDP ratio to something significant, we are going to lose the battle. The more we look inwards, the more we say we don't want to integrate, the further we are going to be away from our target. We need technical expertise, we need investments. So if we are restricted by policies of the state or the attitudes of the people or the chance of the opposition that we must close this country and keep away the technology that comes in, which is absolutely essential to move from a simple, low-productive country to a complex, high-productive and high-wage country, then we can forget about it. Now, if what we are producing can be produced in 100 other countries, and we are competing only on price, as the country grows, as we develop, as our wages rise, can we compete? We cannot. Some of you yourselves have moved your operations to other countries that wages are much cheaper than here. So it is risky to be in buyer-driven networks. We need to move to producer-driven production networks. Producer-driven networks are more technology and capital intensive, with technology and production expertise needed in-house. So that is where we are looking at FDIs, that is where we are looking at innovations locally or otherwise with copyright and ownership of knowledge. New immigration regulations are coming. The cabinet has approved it. We will have visas that will help companies employ specialists and others. that will help transfer technology, either within FTAs or outside FTAs. If you invest $100 million, $50 million, let's say $100 million, that you don't have to pay any taxes until you make $200 million in profits or $300 million in profits if you are investing in difficult areas in the north. It is about integrating. It is about shifting gears from inward looking to outward looking. It is about taking the challenge on. And it is certainly not about erecting more walls around this country. It is certainly not the way forward. Shifting gears has to be something that is meaningful to us, so that ultimately this will help our people improve their standard of living. Soon all these countries will get together. It is called the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. If we can't even sign one agreement with one country, how are we going to sign agreements with ASEAN plus 6 countries? So think about it.
Somebody said, and I don't know whether it was Anubhuti in her presentation, policymakers have to think about the decades to come. Politicians think about the next election. And this is the, if you want, the conflict that we face. And this is the conflict that we are facing immediately. This is the conflict that the Finance Minister, Mangala Samaravira, will be grappling with over the next few weeks. Sri Lanka has, over time, unfortunately, made the wrong decision over decades. That's why we started at the same line, and then you have countries like Singapore where they are today, and you have countries like Sri Lanka where they are today. It's because of this conflict, and it's not a new conflict, it's a conflict that has existed over a long time. Recently, I made a comment about the exchange rate, and I saw the Reuters reporter had misinterpreted my comments on the exchange rate management and misled the public as a result of it. In my comment, what I meant was the fact that the Ministry of Finance would not intervene in exchange rate management. It's a departure from the past. We believe in an independent central bank. We have given the central bank the space, unlike in the past, right? But that was misreported. And it is independently done by the central bank. I understand that the central bank would intervene as and when necessary to curb excessive volatility in the exchange rate. Central bank had made a statement about it. Now, I would go further and hope that not only that, the central bank will actually punish speculators. This is our economy, this is our country, and as Eteri said, we think we know where it's going, and we will make sure that it goes in that direction. And yesterday I was at a seminar, I took the bottle of water and I realized that the bottle of water was more expensive than the kerosene that was being given, and a little under the price of diesel that was being given. In 100 years, our forest cover has come down, and this expense has gone on. But the reason I raised it here when we talk about reform, right? But if you talk about reform in water, I think that those of us who are misusing it should be paying for it, so that those villages in Monoragala are actually subsidized by those taxes that we take. So when you're looking at reform, there are lots of sensitive issues that we need to look at, but you know, politicians, we don't want to even talk about them because they are so sensitive, and we don't have a decade, we just have a few months before the next election. So, the other major reform issue is really protection versus competition. You see, and this is a highly contentious issue. I'm in a private sector audience. Most people who come to see us generally want their industries protected. But where do we want Sri Lanka to really be? Our exporters, some of them have done extremely well. Our rubber tires are used in the world's top aircrafts. Our surgical gloves are used by the world's best surgeons. Our electronic sensors are used in the world's top car brands. Our apparels are worn by the world's top athletes, and also we are producing some of the world's top brands. Our IT software is used in the world's leading stock markets. So we can compete, we must compete. And I think the issue on, I think Eteri's last slide that she brought up, the issue of competition came up strongly. There is no other way for this country unless we open up and unless we basically are ready to compete. Because our 21 million market won't make a huge difference to raise our living standards. We have to access the larger market, and we have to be the gateway to the South Asian market. But we will be removing para-tariffs over the next period, right? And I know that that will mean competition for lots of us here, from the airport development levy to the cessors, right? We are going in that direction. We are, as the presenters showed and talked about, including the keynote speaker today, the Inland Revenue Bill, despite all its hiccups in implementation, and I admit that there are hiccups in implementation, it's certainly moving Sri Lanka to a more rules-based system, taking discretion away from politicians and from bureaucrats.
And that's a wrap of the review for this week. I'll see you same time, same place next week. Until then, good night and good luck.